Georgia. These teams will look a little bit different than they did in their previous matchup. Most notably for Ole Miss, there's a new head coach on the sidelines as Pete Golding takes over for Lane Kiffin. Welcome to Southeast Sports Plus. I'm Gerhard Mathangani, joined by Patrick Walsh. And Patrick, if you're an SEC football fan, all you got to say is Georgia and Ole Miss in New Orleans, in the Sugar Bowl, and the stakes have already heightened. That's a place that the SEC fans know, really love. It's a venue that a lot of SEC fans know and love, and it will now be the site for the quarterfinal game and the winner trying to get to the Final Four.
And I think that the SEC faithful are happy that this is the Sugar Bowl and not the Rose Bowl matchup. Obviously, Alabama is going out to Pasadena to play in the Rose Bowl, but you'd rather have SEC on SEC action in the postseason within the regional footprint, and New Orleans is definitely that. You've got Baton Rouge right up the road, so who knows what Lane Kiffin's going to be doing. Maybe he makes a secret appearance. I believe it's, an hour away?
About that.
I mean, he was probably secretly watching that game last week as well, trying to see, hey, am I going to get my bonuses? Come on, Charlie Weiss Jr., get me my bonuses. Pete Golding, get me my bonuses, even though you didn't want to come to Baton Rouge with me. But before we get back to this game, I saw that Lane Kiffin's staff is finalized, and it's just Ole Miss, Ole Miss, Ole Miss, Ole Miss, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Ole Miss, Ole Miss, retained. Like, oh my goodness, man.
It is interesting as now Ole Miss plays in its second game without Lane Kiffin. I thought going into that first game there was going to be a level of how much is this team distracted. And it really felt like against Tulane at the beginning of the game that they knew exactly what they needed to do. And I like teams that have a bit of a runway before they go into these college football playoff games. Last year, we talked about it earlier in the show. Last year, it was a situation where all four teams that had the first round bye all lost. And you had to think about rest versus rust and teams that are going in with that win. In the NCAA tournament, we've seen a few teams, VCU comes to mind, of teams that went from the first four to the Final Four. They just got a runway. They got a chance to play a game. It was in Dayton, obviously, and then they go out to play their first round game, and they can just go on and make a run. I know you have Ole Miss as far as in your bracket going to the championship, but do you factor in any of that too, just how long it's been since Georgia played and the fact that Ole Miss just got off the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to factor in the fact that I believe it's going to be 26 days when this game kicks off, since Georgia last took a snap against Alabama in Atlanta in the SEC championship, and that's a long time. I think it worked out. Well, at the time, I thought it was going to work out in Oklahoma's favor because obviously you had John Mateer banged up. Maybe it might have worked out in Alabama's favor. You get a couple of those guys healthy. You get some time to spend with your offense, trying to tweak some things here and there. But I do go back to, I still think Ole Miss is going to win this game, but it's hard to forget about that first matchup. And I know Trinidad Chambliss literally just said this a few hours ago, and he said, hey, we were the better team in the first game. And I mean, you can't deny that. Ole Miss should have won that game, but they allowed 17 fourth-quarter points to Georgia. Georgia stormed back, avoided what would have been their second loss at home this season. I don't remember the last time they lost two games at home in a single season. You'd have to go back almost a decade for that. But, I think part of that has to play in for these Ole Miss players because they're like, hey, we should have beaten these guys. And I think the confidence has to be there. Like, hey, we can, in fact, beat these guys. Just got to play a full 60 minutes.
Right, exactly. And Ole Miss scored 14 points in the third quarter, but as you mentioned, outscored 17-0 in the fourth quarter when it really matters. You mentioned Trinidad Chambliss going into this game. You also have Gunnar Stockton, a guy that has kind of been there and done that as far as big games go. Where do you find the edge here with these two quarterbacks that one obviously has had a really good regular season coming in for Austin Simmons, and the other one kind of had that runway from a year ago and was the leader all year?
Well, I mean, when you look at how these two quarterbacks played in the regular season matchup, I mean, pretty even outside of the passing touchdowns. Gunnar Stockton, when you think about the situation in the game, they were coming from behind, so obviously you're going to throw it more. And I think that was Lawson Lucky's 3-touchdown performance against Ole Miss there. So, I mean, he's going to be a guy that he's going to look to target. Obviously, Zachariah Branch is another guy that Gunnar Stockton likes to target. But if I'm looking at these two quarterbacks, I don't know. I almost want to say Trinidad's the better quarterback. Like, is that crazy to say?
No, it's not crazy to say at all. I don't think it's crazy to say at all. And I think that you mentioned this. Had he played a full season, given his production,
he's a Heisman winner.
Exactly. He's right there, right there in the hunt for it. I don't know if Fernando still wins it or not, but he's definitely, I think, stealing some first place votes from Diego Pavia. And definitely stealing some first place votes away from Julian Sayin as well. So in my opinion, I'm right there with you that his production level, because he started the season as a backup, he started kind of behind the 8 ball. But the thing about Gunnar Stockton is that his game is not very sexy. Like, he doesn't really blow you away. But when I saw him have to go throw for throw with Joey Aguilar in Tennessee, he was able to do so. When he had to kind of win a gritty kind of performance against Alabama, I know the special teams really helped out and the defense really helped out there as well. He's able to do that too. I've been really enthralled by what Trinidad Chambliss has been able to do now with 2 different head coaches, 2 different systems, a lot of noise, a lot of hype. But he still seems to be the guy that is the calm, steady ship.
Yeah, and I think when you compare these 2 offenses, I think the edge has to go to Ole Miss. I just think they're more explosive when it comes to explosive plays. And we talk about that all the time. We talked about earlier in the year, Georgia just could not generate these explosive plays. Kirby referenced it as a boxing match. So, they'll give you these quick little jabs before they go for the knockout punch in the fourth quarter. But when you flip it to the defensive side, that's when it hasn't been the defense that we've known and become accustomed to under Kirby Smart at Georgia. But it's still a better defense than Ole Miss's defense. And I think if we're going to do X factors for everything, it's got to be Nate Frazier on Georgia for me, because when you stack up these 2, the run offense for Georgia and the Ole Miss run defense, Georgia ranked 3rd in the SEC with 186.6 yards per game. And look at that Ole Miss run defense. It's hard to ignore that.
Yeah, certainly. And that Kirby Smart wants to be able to run the football. We'll hear from Kirby in a moment. But I think with Ole Miss's run defense, you see a glaring hole. If you're Georgia, you find out, hey, there might be one way to win this game, and that's just, hey, let's keep Trinidad Chambliss on the sideline.
Yes.
And the best way to do that is to run the ball effectively. And if you're Ole Miss, can you get off the field on 3rd down? Can you create, first and long, second and long situations, third and long situations to where they have to put the ball in the air and not run the football? And keep in mind, Gunnar Stockton, while he's not Cam Newton, he is a good runner as well, and he can run the football. He's deadly in the red zone there as well, so he can factor in. I agree with your point about Nate Frazier being the X factor of this game. But they can get their running in a lot of different ways in this matchup. Got a chance to hear from Pete Golding, the Ole Miss now head coach, permanent head coach, on his quarterback at Trinidad Chambliss and all the hype that he's getting throughout the course of the season and now in the playoff.
I think it's awesome when you have a team that's, created this for themselves. And I think that's the beautiful thing about Oxford is such a small town that, Ole Miss is the NFL team. And so any individual that has success becomes, pretty big, pretty quick, And so the best thing about that to me for this team has been, he doesn't let it get to him. So he can have fun and they laugh about it, right? But he's the same dude the next morning, regardless whether he throws for 5 touchdowns or not. He's going to walk in, he's going to go to work and all that. But I think we do have a unique group that can separate when to have fun and when not to have fun. And I think that's really important. I think they engage with our fans really well. They know that's a part of college football now. A lot of our alumni and our fans support, right, and pay for some of these guys through the collective. So they get it. They understand their role with it. But I think it's been really unique for his story, not coming into it, not highlighted as the guy coming into the season like most of them are, to pop up and have the year he's having. And he understands he's having the year he's having because a lot of other people around him. All right, and those guys in front of him that are doing an unbelievable job, and how talented we are on the perimeter. And it's one thing in this offense to be talented on the perimeter, but if you don't have a running back, it's really not going to matter because you become one-dimensional. So he understands how important Lacey is a part of that success. So I think he does a really good job sharing the success with those guys, and they understand when that flag goes up, it's all 11. It ain't just Trinidad. But he does a really good job with it.
Flipping over to the Georgia side, what I find interesting about this team compared to last year, there were still a lot of question marks around Gunnar Stockton. This year, those questions have been answered. They're now on a 9-game winning streak. They lost to Alabama, of course, in the first half. Bama had control of that one. And now, after that game, they've won it in a lot of different ways. They destroyed Texas, played a high-scoring game against Mississippi State. The defense and special teams really stuck out against Alabama. To me, Georgia, if you're asking me who can win a 44-41 game and who can win a 16-9 game, to me, it's Georgia. I feel like Georgia can win in multiple ways in this matchup. Where do you find Kirby Smart and company as they go to this one?
Well, I almost don't know how to feel about this Georgia team because, yes, the record shows. I mean, the one game they lost was just because Alabama dominated the line of scrimmage and time of possession to basically give Gunnar Stockton and Georgia literally no time to do anything with it. But nothing really stands out to me about this team. They're not excellent at one category. They're just above average in everything. And I think that's kind of been the recipe for success for them. But I brought up the fact that it's going to be 26 days since they last played a game. And it's hard to also ignore that after you've been on such a groove. You've been playing some of your best football as of late. The defense has started to come around and play almost to that elite level that we're used to seeing Georgia defenses be at. But it's still, you just don't know what you're going to expect after not playing a football game, not tackling guys, not taking hits for 26 days now.
Right. And you mentioned it when it came to the Alabama-Oklahoma game. I think rest is kind of situational. If your team is already healthy, then you want to go out there. You want to keep playing. If your team is now banged up, which we saw with Alabama, getting guys like Josh Kravis back and some of the others guys back for the Oklahoma game, and then for Oklahoma, getting John Mateer rested up, getting R. Mason Thomas back, it was really helpful. I wonder how much this rest versus rust really hurts Georgia because this was a young team, reeling, for the most part, pretty healthy, feeling really good about themselves. I do wonder, how much this long layoff really helps and or hurts them. But if there is, in my opinion, one guy that I do trust out of all these coaches that are in this final 8, obviously you have Ryan Day, you have Kalen DeBoer. DeBoer's coached his team to a national championship game. Ryan Day just won the national championship. Pete Golding now in his second college football playoff game. Dan Lanning obviously lost last year, coming back. If there's one guy that I could feel can pull the levers in the right direction with where his team needs to be, it's Kirby Smart. And he's done it before. He's seen the greatest of all time do it in Nick Saban, and then he's done it himself with 2 national championships to his name. So I do think that the rest versus rust gets a little mitigated because I do believe in their head ball coach coming into that one.
Yeah, and when I look at last year's matchup against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, it was just one of those recipes for disaster almost. I mean, you're navigating the injury to Carson Beck. You throw in Gunnar Stockton, who really didn't have any experience at the time at all, in a situation where I didn't even think he played that bad against Notre Dame. Just Notre Dame was just the better team. But, this is the same location, the same bowl game. It's in New Orleans. But I almost feel like that's kind of in Ole Miss's favor because Oxford's a lot closer than Athens is. But at the same time, I mean, Georgia fans, they're like Cowboy fans. They're like all those big name brands where they just travel so well. So it's just I don't know how I feel about this game being in New Orleans rather than maybe like Miami or any of the other bowl sites.
Right. Going away from town, whether it's at Indianapolis or at the Rose Bowl or whatever.
I mean, you almost have to. I know I talked a little bit about some things being in your head. You want to stay focused on what's ahead, but you almost have to think about what happened last year, and those thoughts start to creep in your head. Like, hey, we lost here last year. We don't want to do that again. And then you start squeezing a little bit. You hold the football a little bit tighter, and you almost want to you try to aim your throws rather than just playing loose. And it's just, I think Ole Miss in this game has absolutely nothing to lose, and Georgia has absolutely everything to lose.
I do think that a win or loss for Ole Miss, they consider this a phenomenal season and great starting point for going into next year. I think for Georgia, the expectation is to win, get past this game that they could not do last year. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of demons to fight. One of them is right between the ears about not necessarily letting the moment get too big, staying present. That's exactly what we heard from head coach Kirby Smart.
Yeah, we don't really talk much about last year. I mean, we didn't talk about last year's games that we played other teams on the schedule. It's never really about last year for us. It's way more about living in the moment. How do we prepare for the moment? There's nothing about last year's game that's going to help us in this game. There's nothing about our last game against Ole Miss that's going to help us in this game. It's really about what can we do for the next 48 hours to prepare better to be ready to play a big game.
Before we get out of here, and also want to mention one interesting point about you in this game. What are the keys in your opinion? We'll have our official predictions a little bit later in the show. What are your keys to this one?
I think it's going to be the run game for both sides. We talked about Nate Frazier, and he needs to have a big game against a run defense that isn't a strong suit, which is kind of it rings the alarm a little bit for Pete Golding, being the former defensive coordinator, now turned full-time head coach. That's something that you got to keep an eye on. But at the same time, Kewan Lacey is going to be such a major factor for Ole Miss in this game. When you look at that SEC championship, Alabama could not run the ball at all. I believe they had -7 rush yards in that game.
Yes,
something -7, -9, one of those two. So I mean, when you become so one-dimensional, you can dial up that pass rush. And I think with Kewan Lacey in the mix, it adds not only Kewan Lacey, but the fact that Trinidad Chambliss can also run basically whenever he wants it. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns in that opening round win over Tulane. So I think it's going to be what run offense, which rusher runs for more yards at that point. I mean, it's just because both of these passing games are pretty good. I think Ole Miss has the edge on the passing game. They have a few more weapons on the outside, and Trinidad Chambliss has that underdog mentality, because I go back to it's like that Tom Brady down 28-3 on the sidelines.
Right. And I do agree with that. I think that if you do have a solidified game plan, then you do give yourself a great chance. As far as my keys go, I'll actually start with Pete Golding and his unit, that defensive unit. Can they force some turnovers? Yeah. I think that this game with Ole Miss has to be won in the margins, in kind of the same way that Georgia beat Alabama. You have to win defensive special teams. I think that if Ole Miss can create some turnovers, whether it's causing some fumbles with Nate Frazier, intercepting Gunnar Stockton, and giving Trinidad Chambliss and the offense some short yardage situations to be able to score and give themselves some easy touchdowns. You just can't expect to go 70, 80 yards multiple times against this Georgia football team. I think the Ole Miss defense, if they are to win, it would have to be through that way. It'll have to be through the margins there. And I see a really interesting matchup.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see another crazy special teams play that's going to decide the game. I will be there in person, so I'll see it with my own 2 eyes. Heading out to New Orleans tomorrow, so looking forward to it. Should be a fun time. First time actually getting to go to New Orleans just for fun, and just because we were there for Sunbelt Media Days. Right. We were there for one night.
Right.
I think we just had tacos, so I'll have some maybe a little bit nicer food than just tacos this time.
Exactly. You better. I think a lot of New Orleans fans would say, hey, look, if you're going to enjoy our city, we're a food city. You go and enjoy some really good food.
Check out the French Quarter.